Meanwhile, there are growing concerns that the Iran war could impact weapon stockpiles here in Europe. The White House has told some NATO allies they won't be getting the weapons that they have purchased because the U.S. needs them for the war in Iran, as DW's Terry Schultz reports.
U.S.-led attacks on Iran have burned through Washington's missile supplies. Now that's affecting countries on the front line of another war. Estonia, Finland and Lithuania, which all share a border with Russia, are among the customers of U.S. arms manufacturers who've been told they won't be getting their weapons on time.
We understand the reasoning and the circumstances, and we are in close contact with them, with the United States of America, and discussions how to address these supply challenges.
Estonia has purchased several U.S.-made high-mobility artillery rocket systems, called HIMARS, which consist of a vehicle and a rocket launcher. The Pentagon says the extra HIMARS ammunition Tallinn ordered and paid for will be delayed. The chair of the Estonian Parliament's Defense Committee says they need to know. Will the backlog be weeks, months, or years?
We'll have to do something about it, because it doesn't make sense to have those systems somewhere in a storage site and not having enough munitions to be used. They are no use then in a conflict situation.
A regular target of Kremlin threats, Estonia can't risk its readiness. What Estonia might do if the delay drags on, Stoichescu explains, is to shift more of its budget, which is already at 5% of GDP, to non-American suppliers, such as South Korea, which produces a competitor to the U.S. HIMARS. Estonia has already bought some of those, too.
Korea have always been in time, so we trust Koreans.
Several European countries are expanding their defense deals with South Korea, something the U.S. industry will have to face if it doesn't fulfill its contracts. What's most likely to happen in the short term is that those countries facing delays try to allay concern about the problem in public while resolving it quickly in private. For one thing, allies do understand Washington having to shift priorities while it wages a war on Iran. At the same time, they have other concerns too.
Frontline states also don't want to send a signal to Russia that if there are any delays in any deliveries, that somehow makes us weaker. That's not the case. We are very vigilant and very prepared for any kind of contingencies on the eastern front line of NATO. But of course, it doesn't make things easier, and it's not a situation that anybody is happy with.
It's just one more reminder that Europe is a long way from having a defense industry that can produce everything it needs.
How serious is this weapons delivery backlog for frontline states like Estonia and Finland? Are these weapons that eastern flank countries need now? I put that question to Loic Simonet, a research fellow at the Austrian Institute for International Affairs.
Yeah, actually, since the beginning of the crisis, European countries have been worrying that the US is burning through munitions so fast that it won't have enough to send the weapons Europe has purchased. So European allies find themselves in an absurd situation. The Trump administration has put them under extreme political pressure to raise defense budgets and buy American weapons. That can be air defense interceptors, guided bombs, and so on, only to quickly burn through those munitions in a war of its own. So it's a wake-up call for Europe. Several countries, Baltic, Scandinavian nations, are affected. And you mentioned Estonia, a case in point, a tragedy for a tiny frontline nation. But needless to say, for Ukraine as well, the consequences will be dire. Already early April, the US president was threatening to stop the supply of weapons to Ukraine as a way to pressure Europeans into joining a coalition that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So cuts and delays in key weapon deliveries can only improve Russia's position on the battlefield and make its air assaults more deadly.
And if the delays continue, how would you assess the capacity within NATO for other allies to step in and support countries, for example, like Estonia and Finland?
With rising global tensions and Washington now prioritizing Middle East operations, the growing supply crunch is raising serious concerns about NATO preparedness, strategic autonomy and the long-term reliability of US defense commitments. So the development signals a critical moment for transatlantic defense cooperation. European nations that have struggled to rebuild arsenals after sending weapons to Ukraine fear that they won't be able to ward off a Russian attack. So there might be a window of vulnerability for NATO ally in case of future conflicts. I'm not saying that it will happen, and I find these alarming rumors of an imminent invasion of Europe by Russia quite irresponsible. But the fact is that Trump's war exposes our fragilities and weaknesses. And actually, this last episode only reflects long-standing criticism of NATO over burden sharing and defense commitments.
We heard in that report a little bit earlier, officials saying that they understand Washington's priorities during the Iran conflict. But I'm wondering how you are seeing the strain that this is putting on trust between the United States and its European partners.
Yeah, that's definitely a strain on trust. The Pentagon decision certainly reflects practical necessity, but it has also a clear punitive dimension, in my opinion. It is also a way to retaliate NATO allies over their reluctance to join the armed conflict with Iran and to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil shipping route. So Trump has framed his demands as a test of loyalty when it comes to countries that rely on the US for their security. Most European leaders, as we know, have resisted, saying they would not participate in a war they did not begin. Since then, Trump has repeatedly lashed out at European nations. So tensions between the United States and its allies are at high again.
And I'm wondering, given those set of conditions, and I just want to look at one specific case. We have the case now of South Korea becoming the second largest supplier of weapons systems now to NATO countries. Given those conditions that you've highlighted, do you see Europe quietly rewiring its procurement away from the United States?
Yes. I feel that the joint US-Israel war could accelerate the distancing between America and its allies when it comes to defense. Poland's relationship with Korea is a good example. Poland is a long-time American ally, and it's modernizing its military by purchasing tanks, howitzers, rocket systems from South Korea, rather than relying solely on US contractors like General Dynamics, for example. However, Europe's room for maneuver is thin. For instance, Europe is increasingly reliant on the US-made F-35 fighter jets for its air power, with over 30 nations adopting it, creating a deep strategic, technical, and operational dependency. And I've recently heard from specialists that it would take 40 years to Europe to get rid of this F-35 dependency. And we know that the US puts EU's reliance on US security and defense in the balance to get economic benefits with a kind of blackmail from the US.
We want to thank you so much for your time and your expertise, security expert Loic Simonet. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, joining me now is Riccardo Alcaro, head of the Global Actors Program at the IAI, the Institute of International Affairs in Rome. He is a specialist in transatlantic relations. It's good to have you on the program. Riccardo, Europe, you know as well as I do, has spent years being told to buy more American weapons and to take more responsibility for its own defense. That is now happening, but some of those weapons, they may be delayed because Washington needs them elsewhere. What does this tell us about Europe's real security dependence?
Well, it tells us that Europe is still incapable of making sure that it can defend itself on its own and that it is not vulnerable to contingencies, even major ones like the Iran war, which, curiously enough, given that it is geographically located far away from Europe, is doing more damage to the transatlantic relationship than divisions between the Trump administration and European governments over Ukraine did in the past.
Reuters is reporting delays to previously contracted U.S. weapons deliveries, and it's reporting the Baltic and Scandinavian countries are going to be affected here. How serious is this for NATO's eastern flank?
It is a serious and concerning situation. Look, if the delays are contained in time and they only affect replenishment orders, the situation is manageable. But if the delays are more prolonged in time and concentrated in critical military assets like air defenses, missile defenses, or long-range precision strike like the HIMARS that were mentioned in your program, then the Europeans will have a problem. And the Scandinavians and Baltic countries are already doing what they are supposed to do, that is thinking about alternatives. The South Korean alternative is certainly one way. The other alternative is to make sure that the European can build up procurement mechanisms that are less reliant on foreign actors, and especially are less reliant on the possibilities that, for whatever reasons, foreign actors, foreign providers of military assets, including the United States, can impinge on the ability of the European countries to sustain defense and deterrence tasks.
And would you agree, though, that probably in most NATO countries here in Europe, the hope is that what we're looking at right now is a temporary bottleneck that's being caused by the Iran war? I mean, the sentiment remains that Europe would prefer to have the U.S. as its weapon supplier than to find alternatives, right?
Well, I cannot say whether the issue we're talking about today, so the delay in the supply of weapons built by U.S. companies that were purchased by European governments is going to be temporary. I very much hope so, and I'm pretty sure that European governments, especially the Baltics and the Scandinavians, are already working behind closed doors to reach out to the US government in order to ensure that such delays are indeed limited. But the issue of procurement and the security of procurement is going to remain a concerning point the Europeans will have to deal with very seriously and very quickly. And my suggestion would be, because we always hope that the US will go back to be a reliable suppliers of weapons, we can also not base our calculations on that, and therefore redundancy is the key here. You work on one track, you work with the US government so that any delays is short term, and you ensure that you have the money and to place further orders, and at the same time you work on other extra European potential suppliers like South Korea. And also, and this is critical, but more mid to long term, you work on a European autonomous procurement system.
Yeah. Riccardo Alcaro, good to have you on the program. Good to get your insights into a situation that seems to be changing by the day now. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.